Hello, I'm Simon Whistler. You're watching Today I Found Out, and in the video today, the curious case of the murder tree. Due to the fact that they can't move and therefore can't sneak up on you, many people never really think of trees as being dangerous. It turns out though, beyond the occasional tree that kills a person by falling on them, there's also a tree out there that is so deadly it has been dubbed the suicide tree. But as you'll soon see, the murder tree is just as apt a name. Cerbera odolum, also known in its native India as the ping-pong tree, is a small hardwood tree that can, under favorable conditions, grow to around 10 meters in height and is endemic to India and Southeast Asia. Despite its unassuming appearance, the tree hides a deadly secret inside the husk that contains its seeds. These seeds contain a cardiac glycoside called cerberin. Cerberin is incredibly toxic in relatively low dosages, often killing its victims within a few hours, during which time they may suffer crippling stomach pain, diarrhea, irregular heart rhythm, vomiting, and sometimes a splitting headache. Once enough of it has accumulated in your system, the cerberin will succeed in completely inhibiting the cellular sodium-potassium pump enzyme, screwing with the heart's electrical system, and ultimately stopping it dead. This is actually very similar to how lethal injections in the United States work. And for reference here, a single Cerbera odolum seed contains a lethal dose of cerberin for a typical adult human. While the accidental ingestion of the inner seed is not completely unheard of due to the fruit produced by the tree being edible, if a little bitter, it is commonly used for murder and suicide in Indian coastal towns which border the sort of marshy swampland the trees like to grow in. How many people are killed by having their food intentionally spiked with the seeds each year isn't clear because it doesn't show up on normal toxicology reports. It's also relatively unknown in many regions of the world. This has led some experts, such as French toxicologist Yvan Galliard, who published the results of a decade-long study on this very topic in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology, to describe the plant as being perfect for murder. You see, most toxicologists, even if they've heard of the plant, will only test for cerberin poisoning if there's a strong suspicion that the victim consumed something containing it prior to their death. This is because testing for cerberin poisoning is pretty costly, and it requires the use of high-performance liquid chromatography coupled with mass spectrometry to detect with any degree of certainty something that is not an option in many regions anyway. Of course, those toxicologists who've never heard of it would never know to check. Because of this, the amount of deaths caused by this seed poisoning is uncertain. That said, based on the documented instances that are known, which likely make up a small percentage of the actual total, the plant is responsible for at least a death per week in the South Indian state of Kerala alone. In this part of India, the plant grows wild and in abundance and is responsible for an estimated 50% of all plant poisoning cases annually in the region. So now you might be wondering, well, why would a person who's being poisoned with such a seed not taste it, given its bitter flavor? Well, this is because the bitter flavor can very easily be masked by putting it into a dish containing something like chilies that are very prevalent in Indian cuisine. The taste can also be masked with sugar, and the vast majority of suicides committed via ingestion of the seeds is done by removing the seed from the outer husk and then crushing and mixing it with raw cane sugar. Now, it's certainly not the most pleasant way to die, but it's freely available and it has a relatively certain outcome, which makes it extremely popular. Interestingly, with the limited data that we do have, including suicides and murders, it's noted that 75% of people who die via ingesting the seeds are women. Researchers at the Laboratory of Analytical Toxicology in La Haute-Saône speculate that this massive gender discrepancy is because the plant is being used to poison newly married wives who do not meet the exacting standards of some Indian families. However, beyond the murders, young women are also statistically much more likely to use the seeds to commit suicide. Such was the tragic case in May of 2015 when 4 young girls consumed the seeds as part of a suicide pact after being abused at an athletic training camp. That said, it should be noted that in the Western world, while about 4 men will commit suicide for every 1 woman, nearly 3 times as many women as men will attempt to kill themselves. If the popular method of suicide in the Western world was using something like Cerbera odolum seeds, where death is almost certain, it could potentially skew those tragic numbers significantly to be somewhat in line with the Laboratory of Analytical Toxicology's data for Kerala in India. Whatever the case, the prominent use of this plant in suicides and murders has led to local governments trying to find new uses for this natural resource. Particularly in impoverished areas, if the seeds have marketable uses, it's literally money growing on trees for any of the populace who wants it, making the seeds less readily available as they're harvested en masse. This means less death and more money to the local economy. Towards this end, in recent years, the seeds have begun being harvested for use in various products like bioinsecticides and rat poison, among other things. In Kerala, where the plant is responsible for more deaths than anywhere else on the planet, locals can earn a decent living dehusking the plant with their bare hands in various processing yards across the state. And now for some bonus facts. You'll know that we said that ingesting the seeds is a relatively certain way to die. Modern medical science being pretty amazing, there are methods to counteract the poison's effects. For instance, a 51-year-old woman in Maryland decided ingesting the seeds of the cerebrodalim would be a good way to shuffle off this mortal coil, so she ordered some on eBay. She then ground them up and ate them. However, she must have changed her mind after the fact, because when the effects of the poison started kicking in and it got real, she rushed herself to the emergency room. At this point, her heart rate was a scant 30 beats per minute. The medical staff were simply stumped. They first thought she'd been the victim of digoxin poisoning, which has similar effects, but the labs said no. When she finally admitted what she'd done, the doctors decided to try administering 20 vials of digoxin immune FAB at a whopping $500 to $700 per vial. It worked, and she later walked out of the hospital with a clean bill of health, hopefully receiving some counseling or other help to go along with what the miracle workers at the hospital did. And now for another bonus fact. In the 19th century, the fruit of the Cerbera odalum was used in Madagascar, a place where it's also known to grow, to test a person's innocence. Those convicted of a crime were sometimes required to eat the fruit to prove their innocence. If they survived, they were free to go. Because a single seed of the fruit is enough to kill, this invariably led to a lot of guilty individuals. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below, and don't forget to subscribe. We've got brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, I'd like to take this moment to thank our patrons on Patreon. If you're interested in supporting us with a small and totally voluntary financial contribution, please head over to patreon.com/TodayIFoundOut. And as always, thank you for watching.